So, who wants to see two of the baddest girls in fiction beat one of the most horrible villains in fiction? I want to make something clear before I go into this video. Some of you who know this game know that it has very controversial and uncomfortable scenes in it. I'm going to be editing a chunk of those out and only putting in the things that are absolutely necessary to get points across. That said, I will be holding off until toward the back end of the video to get a deep look into those sorts of things. So, when we get to that point, I will give a very clear warning if you would rather not see anything you might have issues with or find uncomfortable. If you have a problem with stories or situations that you feel go too far, this game is probably going to go there and further. Please stick around for the analysis on everything else, but when the more controversial elements come around, feel free to leave. I'm not going to force you to sit through anything you don't want to see. That said, I do feel it is worth covering those and the approach they took toward them and the lessons learned. Again, I will make sure to point out when that is. Now, the last two Danganronpa games have been murder mysteries where you try to figure out who done it while discovering the awful truths of the situation everyone's in. The first game was a strong start with some rough edges, while the second game really found its footing with improvements in gameplay and story that gave us an incredible experience. Ultra Despair Girls takes place between those two games, kind of a 1.5, changing from a murder mystery visual novel with investigation and trial elements to a third-person shooter. Well, more like a visual novel puzzle shooter. In a game series known for murder and death, the protagonist this time is surviving in a world gone mad, with nothing but a megaphone gun that can only damage or control mechanical objects. This includes the army of Monokuma robots, showing us how dangerous the mascot can actually be when the leash is off. The gameplay is mostly focused on exploration along a mostly linear path while fending off the robot. I'd say hordes, but the combat isn't as common as the word shooter would suggest. There's plenty of enemies to break, but it won't play like Doom. In fact, the controls in combat is fairly rudimentary, and at times a little slow to react compared to more dedicated shooting games. You have a number of attacks at your disposal, with break being your main damage bullet. Others, however, have their uses in the environment or against the enemy. Knockback to get rid of shields or push certain enemies into others. Paralyze to not just stun, but also shock enemies in water. And move to activate machines for pickups or to drive cars over enemies. These aren't the only ones, but those examples help show what I mean by a puzzle shooter. There's even a ton of challenge rooms where if you figure out how, you can herd the Monokumas into a one-shot victory. Most of them aren't that hard, but I've had issues where being off just slightly or randomness can screw you out of a perfect score. If you'd rather just shoot the damn things, though, the glowing red eye is always the weak point. Now, I'm sure it's harder to get a clean shot on the PS Vita that this thing came out on first, but the version I'm playing is obviously keyboard and mouse on computer. Therefore, I really haven't had any difficulty with the game on the normal difficulty until the final boss, which, as you'll see in the footage later, I still can't get the hang of some of his attacks. Aside from shooting, you can also choose to have your partner go into an invincible slashy super mode to help clear the tougher fights. Yes, you'll recognize her from the first game, so I think now's a good time to get into the characters.
My name is Komaru Naegi. I'm a completely normal high school girl who lives an abnormal daily life.
Little sister of the first game's protagonist, and was shown early on to be kidnapped along with the rest of Makoto's family. It turns out she's been locked in an apartment for a year and a half, which means we're picking up 6 months after the ending of the first game. She's just a normal girl with a combination of normal, geeky, and way out there interests to discover during the game. But most importantly, she's kind of the only time in the entire game series we have someone that isn't part of the whole ultimate skill thing. This is reflected by her mannerisms and ways of dealing with things throughout the game. Namely, she's lost, confused, unsure what to do a lot of the time, and scared out of her damn wits. A major aspect of her character development is that she never really loses those aspects, but still matures and learns to move ahead despite those feelings. Mostly because of help from...
It's Toko Fukawa.
Toko Fukawa?
Oh, sorry for having such a boring name. I bet you think it's perfect for a hag like me, right?
A lot of my love for this character comes from this game, and probably influenced how I described her in my video for the first game. Naturally, this means she survived the events, and she still pines for Byakuya, sneaking into the city to follow him around in the first place. Fortunately, she isn't a slouch when it comes to defending herself, because of a trick up her skirt. Remember me bringing up Genocide Jack in the first video?
Found you.
Yeah, we get to meet her in this game too. Jack is Toko's serial killer split personality, which by this point she has more control over. Turns out Jack likes to target victims that she sees as pretty boys, seemingly brought on by Toko having issues with boys that were pranking her with fake dates. They don't share memories, but they do share emotions and feelings. So since Toko is madly in love with Byakuya, Jack feels the same. Now, Byakuya is aware of this aspect of Toko. He figured it out in the first game to begin with. But he seems to offer a way to incentivize her to control it. Which I'm mostly basing that off of, he does seem to at least show respect toward Toko in the end of this game and the short moment he mentions her in Danganronpa 2. I don't think he's ever going to go on a date with her or anything, but it's better than he was before. In short, Toko cannot join the Future Foundation fully and be close to Byakuya if Genocide Jack ever kills anyone. So, even Jack is willing to hold back so she can be with her master. No, Toko hasn't stopped acting or fantasizing that way toward Byakuya, and it's still used for levity and humor. I'll get back to that in a moment. With all that said, she tags along with Komaru for the stated reason that she's still Future Foundation, even if just an intern. So she has to help protect people. To that end, when her meter is filled up enough, you can summon Jack to become an invincible engine of destruction, slashing and tearing enemies apart with specially made scissors she keeps holstered under her skirt, next to the kill tally scar she gave herself over the years. Since she's a survivor of the first game, however, she has a tendency to get serious and look down on others when they seem to be giving up. Eventually she declares Komaru her first true friend, and this becomes important not just to the two of them and their support of each other, but to the story and interactions with others as well. To say it here, if you take issue with her fantasies of her and Byakuya, then you can at least take solace in the fact that by the end of the game, she chooses to stay with the less toxic friendship she has with Komaru. So even though the game makes a lot of humorous moments and jokes about a number of things, including plenty of mature things, it still treats things seriously when appropriate or needed. Either that or it's being indecisive and hypocritical about things. I'll leave that to your discretion by the end of the video. For me, though, I believe there's enough evidence for the former, at least for the most part.
I'm your ally. Look, I'm all white, see? to be called Shirokuma.
Okay, so technically the Monokuma we've come to know and expect in the series isn't in this game. But instead we get an ally in a Monokuma that painted himself all white, changed his name, and tries to be friendly and helpful to everyone. We come across him in Chapter 2, where he leads us to a hidden shelter the survivors have been hiding at, and he tries to be the voice of peace and reason toward everyone.
I can finally talk! Finally!
Yin and Yang, here's a full evil version of Monokuma. Well, he was already conniving, manipulative, and evil. I think you get what I mean. Painted all black is exceptionally rude and foul, and is trying to manipulate the enemy into continuing their path of destruction, vengeance, and death. Though in the end he's mostly ignored by them, his presence is enough to have a role in things overall. Both of them actually have AIs in them instead of just basic robot programming like the other Monokumas. So they're kind of independent and join their respective sides sort of freely.
Yo, Shirokuma! I heard you were looking for me. Name's Haiji Toa.
Leader of the Resistance, whenever the adults decide to fight back anyway. Like most of the survivors, he has a full-on hatred and grudge toward the enemy, and is mostly focused on keeping everyone hidden and safe until the time comes for them to join our heroes in a counterattack. This doesn't mean he's a nice guy, though. By the end of the game, you'll have plenty of reason to want to throw him off a building just as much as the main villain, but until that time, he does try to be helpful when he's sure the heroines are worth helping. So, anyone out there know Children of the Corn? Omen? Damien? Anybody? Okay, enough playing coy. The villain in this game is every damn child in Toa City. Under the leadership of the Warriors of Hope, they use the Monokuma robot army to wipe out all the adults they can find to create a paradise for children. This isn't where you should switch off yet. I'm not getting too deep into that yet. And as for the Warriors of Hope, they're the 5 kids in charge of all the others. Each one is given the spotlight in their respective chapters, so I'll cover them in order as we go along later on. For now, just know that all 5 have very good reasons for wanting to go this far. Or at least, horrifyingly understandable reasons that are too damn realistic. To make the point here without getting too deep into it, the game regularly focuses on the lasting consequences of what happened to these kids. And among those lasting consequences is that even though they got revenge on adults and aspects of society, the pain is still there. The fear remains. And when you fear something, it's easy to dehumanize it, lose empathy for it, hurt it. That's as far as I'll get right now about that, so for now let's look at one more character that's seemingly helping them.
Me? Oh, my name's not really important. After all, I'm just a lowly servant.
If you saw my video on the second game or played it yourself, then you know why this guy being here is a very, very bad thing in a story that is taking place before the second game. To make it clear, his name is Nagito, and he's definitely not as much of a servant as the others think he is. His focus and goals are about pushing despair higher and higher to the breaking point, just so he can create a moment for the biggest amount of hope to break through. For that reason, he's working with the kids as their so-called servant, as he makes moves behind their backs for his own goals that just barely align with theirs. As a way to explain it more, he's trying to help build the Death Star not to take over the galaxy, but to see it get destroyed by the good guys after it blows up a couple planets. A very twisted kind of kingmaker. Now, I'll give a bit of an overview of the story before coming back later to give a deeper look at the other things involved with it. To summarize things up front, though, I will say that I think the game does an excellent job with the writing of the characters, the interactions, and how things build up and pay off. And as is usual for the games, the voice acting isn't just good, but is integral to the impact of certain scenes. If you haven't played any of the other games, the start of Chapter 3 gives an overview of the first game so you aren't left out of the loop. And it's played pretty well, as you have survivors with clear trauma and fear from the events recounting it in their own ways. When Junko's name comes out in the second boss fight, as well as coming across other relatives of characters from the first game, Toko's reactions are a clear indicator of what kind of hell she went through in the first game. The first chapter has you looking for a way out of the city with Toko, fighting off the Monokumas while taking in the destruction and casualties of the rampage going on. When you come across another survivor, it starts giving you hints of how far this game is willing to go in terms of the writing, until the first boss makes it clear as crystal. During the second chapter, the girls rescue Shirakuma. He leads them to the adult's hideaway, where we find out Haiji has some kind of problem with the Future Foundation and gives them the cold shoulder. I'll just clear this up now, because it's kind of in the other section this is learned in. This is mostly because he's a part of the corporation that was neck deep in the ultimate tragedy that destroyed the world. It was unwitting at first, but as things came out and they figured out what was going on, they were not just in too deep, but they also were convinced it was a way for them to make money by selling the technology to fight back against the robots as well as fix the world. Now, here's an interesting thing to notice by this point. This is a game where you're constantly surrounded by blood, bodies, death, and wanton destruction. For all that, your characters are explicit in the story about how they are not and will not kill any living thing. When Monokumas attack the base, the girls fight like hell in the middle of all the panic and screaming to keep any more people from dying. However, Haiji loses his cool at the timing of it and throws the two of them into holding cells, thinking they must have led the robots to their base. Komaru winds up getting an unexpected visitor that abducts her to another location, with Toko transforming into Genocide Jack and chasing after her. This leads to a badass sequence for the character, as well as one of the more infamous parts of the game afterward. We'll save that for later. Eventually it comes to light that the Warriors of Hope are holding Byakuya hostage, and Toko is blackmailed with that to escort Komaru to their headquarters for an untold reason. By the time this comes out, though, Toko has bonded enough with Komaru to not actually want to lead her to obvious danger. For this reason, the boss fight has her hold back, damaging clothes when hit enough before damaging health, and Komaru has to break her stun gun to finish the fight. I know what's going through your mind, and yeah, I'm sure some fan service wasn't exactly a hard sell for the developers. That said, as we'll get into later in the final section about all this, there's good reason to think there was a little more to them putting this in. For her part, Genocide Jack is peeved at how she was used and almost legitimately kills Nagito before Komaru, as her friend, intervenes. In a pretty good scene, Komaru solidifies her friendship toward Toko and promises to help her rescue Byakuya while they try to find a way to end the conflict going on. It's interesting to point out that by now in the story, the reason things came to a head like this is because one of the Warriors of Hope decides Komaru screwed up enough of their plans.
I don't want you to interfere any longer. So please, just get out of here. Stay away from us, please.
Too bad Komaru was already questioning the idea of leaving by then and was hinting she was going to stay with Toko anyway before Nagito pulled his stunt to keep her in the city. This is pretty much the part of the game where, despite the fears either of them have, they begin to support each other much more than before and head back to the Resistance to put together a plan. Using some secrets Haiji knew about back at his father's company, They get a giant Monokuma under their control to lead an attack against the robot army and clear a path to the main villain of the game so they can destroy the Monokuma control device. It's here that after a long sequence, Toko rescues Komaru from a pit of despair she's sunk into. And with all the dark crap that's been going on with this game in summary so far, I think it's worth sharing this scene fully.
My hand hurts. But that's not the only thing that hurts. This is the first time I've ever slapped someone in the face. See what you've made me do? Now come on, hit me back. Why? Isn't it obvious? It makes us even. I've never had a friend, so I don't know what to do in situations like this. So just, for now, if you hit me, we're square, right? So, hit me! Fine. That was pretty strong. Jeez! You're right. You're right. My hand hurts. That's not the only thing that hurts. Yeah.
With one final boss fight, Byakuya is rescued, and Komaru resolves to stay in the city to help put things back together and create peace between the traumatized adults and what turned out to be the brainwashed children. The helmets weren't there just for show, and while the game doesn't follow up on what happens, I can assume Komaru's hacking gun might be a part of an answer to safely get the things deactivated or removed. Hearing this, even when Byakuya is right there next to her, Toko declares that she'll stay behind with her new friend as well. To repeat a little, Toko is fully aware of how toxic her fantasy relationship with Byakuya would be. With that in mind, I think Toko is making a conscious decision to be with the person that will actually respect her and treat her well. This can also be taken that in the end, Toko just wants some sort of help and support to be able to become someone normal in her eyes. After all, with Toko, being normal is considered a fantasy. Though on the note of Byakuya, her fantasies do give his voice actor a chance to broaden his range beyond stuck-up jackass. Look, I know this all sounds like I'm making excuses or something, but with this game in particular compared to the rest of the series, you're going to want to have excuses to smile and laugh a little. The villainous Warriors of Hope, now having a full understanding of what's going on, survived and are presumably trying to gather up and defend the brainwashed kids until there's peace again. Meanwhile, Monica is rescued by an even more insane Nagito that declares not only will he make her into a greater ultimate despair than Junko was, but that the rest of the remnants of despair are on their way to the city as a side effect of her plans and actions. She seemingly takes up the role in the epilogue pictures shown during the credits, but we'll get more into that in the next game's video. This also combines with what happens next to lead us into the second game. The AI in the monocolored Monokumas was actually Junko's AI split between them, manipulating the adults and the children in equal measure. And that introduces us to Izuru Kamakura, the main factor that helped Junko initiate the tragedy, and a cliffhanger that isn't answered until the finale of Danganronpa 2. Or if you already know what happens, a scene that ties it all together.
Well, I'm sure the next time I see you, you'll be someone else entirely.
Honestly, the ending sequence might not seem like much if you don't know or don't care about Danganronpa 2, but as a fan of that game especially, I love seeing the little links in it. Overall, I actually love this game a lot. Outside of issues with landing shots and what I feel are moments I got screwed out of the challenge room solutions. In fact, I'd say this is one you can play and enjoy without having experience with the rest of the series, and still get a good feel for how it does things. Komaru and Toko are some of the strongest heroes and characters I've ever seen. Period. Their character growth and depth, their progression and interaction through the game, I would go as far as to say they're excellent female protagonists in general, and they put Lara Croft to shame, and Samus Aran would probably salute them. I actually felt for them and was rooting for them, and since it was Danganronpa, I was fully concerned there was going to be a harsh or dark ending for at least one of them. Fortunately, there wasn't one, but they definitely went through a special kind of hell, much worse than what the Killing Game in Hope's Peak Academy was like. In all, this was a great game if you were a fan of the series or not. It's a damn crime it's not included in the compilation release of the other games, because as much as Danganronpa 2 is my overall favorite of the series, this game's heroines really are top of the class, and the treatment given to the villains was definitely a risky move that I think paid off horrifyingly well. That is going to bring me to what some of you might not want to get into, though. Before you turn off, I'll lead with this. As I've said before, writing a story is a balancing act between respect for your vision versus respect toward the readers or the viewers. We all have different levels of tolerance for screwing with us, or how we see you using the characters, or the setting, or our expectations. To that end, respect towards certain things that happen in real life, or, God forbid, things that people themselves have gone through, is something important to consider and keep in mind. In all the other Danganronpa games, there's a lot of things that are fantastic or otherwise require us to suspend our disbelief to allow the fiction to play out and try to impress us. A single woman being manipulative enough to destroy the entire world, virtual worlds, even the thing about people being superhumanly good at what their ultimate skill is. This game has just as fantastic elements, but the characters and themes feel more grounded and definitely hit closer to home for some of us. Instead of being what pushes people to rationalize killing, this game offers the exploration of what makes people hurt, and how their suffering can be damaging to more than just themselves. And using kids as the focus of that can be seen as either edgy and shocking, or using that shock and uncomfortableness to more deliberately confront what are real situations to people of all ages. This game would humble the likes of Children of the Corn or Lord of the Flies. And I know that sounds a bit like an exaggeration, but now is the time I'm going to go into a deep dive of not just the story, but what happened to these kids. Importantly, this game doesn't just give us evil kids, but also what made them evil, the consequences on society of that evil, and how chillingly real it actually is. If you are uncomfortable with anything that would harm children in the real world, then I ask you to recognize, if not respect, the attempt this game gave to exploring and giving light to it. And I am serious in saying that I believe it is trying to be honestly respectful toward those issues. There may be some missteps in how they present things, but we'll get into that. But since these are going to be blatantly uncomfortable things the game gets into, and either by design or accident makes us consider and confront them, now is the time to leave. For the rest of you that are sticking around, buckle up, because this is going to get harsh. But as I said, I do believe there's important realizations and lessons to be found in this. To start, Chapter 1 focuses on Komaru getting hunted down by Masaru Daimon. He's the one that plays up killing adults as if it's a game the most, boasting that he has the most points. And for all the childlike emotions the kids give toward everything, especially when Komaru is confused or at their mercy, I wasn't on board with them being fully creepy or frightening until the start of the first boss fight. It was Danganronpa. I thought I was prepared. And then my thoughts got cut off with this part, and more or less the entire game changed for me. I'm going to give this scene a couple minutes to play out in full so that you can have the full effect for yourself.
If I hunt down every single demon, then nobody has to be afraid anymore. They won't have to be afraid of the violence and the pain. Won't have to. Afraid. I won't be afraid. I'm not scared at all! I don't have to be scared of the dark and the pain and the alcohol smell. Not anymore! Not anymore. Not anymore. No matter how much you beat me, I won't be afraid anymore. You hear me? Not going to be afraid. What is this? Yeah, that's weird. Damn it! Stop! 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 I said stop! I'm not scared! I'm not scared! I'm not scared! I'm not scared of anything! I'm a hero! I'm a hero! A hero isn't afraid of anything! He isn't afraid of dying, of killing, nothing! So just stop! Please stop it! Stop! 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 Stop already! Stop! 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 Damn it! Stop! Oh! I tell you! Please stop that! It finally listened to me.
That was the moment I realized someone out there wasn't screwing around. Masaru was a sports prodigy that had to go through the very real abuse of a violent father. And unlike something like, say, Law and Order SVU, this game just showed us how that kind of crap not just harms, but sticks with a kid. Masaru was willing to literally beat himself up to push back down the fear and memories, then played it off like it was a joke when it was clear it wasn't. And holy hell, that voice acting for it. I was legitimately concerned the voice acting was done so well in these scenes because they might have actually lived it. I'm still unsure if they did. I'm a little afraid to go look. Chapter 2 is Jitaro Komori's moment in the spotlight. And he's been gaslit so much about his face that he legitimately thinks people will die if they look at him without the mask. In fact, he's gotten to the point he has a twisted enjoyment of people hating him, and everyone else, including his so-called comrades, are more than willing to oblige him as a repository for other ire, hate, and abuse. His skill is arts and crafts, so he shows it off to the heroines with a video of him making dancing marionettes out of the adult corpses he's gathered, just so he can brag more and more about it to get them to hate him more. In the end, we find out that, somewhat obviously, he had a nice face he shouldn't have been ashamed of, but it's not the truth that damaged him. His mother hated him for looking better than her, made him wear the mask, and it's arguable he's the most damaged of the 5 kids. Admittedly, it might be a weak argument considering what else is going to be coming up soon, but he's not having an easier time than the others. The thing to take note about him is that Jotaro is always looked down upon and hated and treated with contempt by those around him, including his so-called teammates. So he's never able to have full peace or escape from his history. I mean, the same can be said for the other ones just as much, but with Jotaro we get the idea that he's alone more than the others are. However, he still gives some of the most chilling lines in the game about the warped thought processes of the kids. And after him comes the most infamous chapter of the game. Chapter 3 gets into what happened with Kotoko Utsugi. What happened with her? She's an elementary school girl that was in the entertainment industry. Please don't make me say it out loud. To add to that, her mother joined in on it as a twisted sense of getting closer with her daughter, while Kotoko's father was taking the money to go have fun with a mistress. Chapter 3 is also where a fairly uncomfortable minigame comes up where you have to slap away grabbing hands that Kotoko is controlling. Like nearly everything else in the game, this sequence is played dead serious, outside of what I see as a misstep with trying to make jokes about it during the tutorial. Now, snarky and mocking comments and jokes in the tutorial segments are a common thing throughout the entire Danganronpa series, so I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt that it was just habit or them trying to figure out a way to soften the blow for something they knew was going to be uncomfortable. That said, this is probably one of the moments in the game you'll take more issue with it than the others. However, outside of that, the more serious tone they take with the consequences of the events and the events themselves is kind of the only reason I accept it being in the game in the first place. Could they have done something else to give the same effect? Definitely. But I've played Fear Effect 2, and they have a similar scene in this game toward the beginning where a similar event happens and the 2 girls treat it as a joke and then move on like nothing happened. I feel this part is meant to confront the idea of naughty fan service that gets in media, among the more obvious things. Especially Kotoko's lines come off as mocking and spiteful on topics even close to this. And for the record, no, I don't just mean anime. I'm also thinking of stuff like 80s and 90s R-rated movies. Or Titanic. I can understand the controversy around it. But at the same time, consider what came before it, how things go during it, and how it's treated after Genocide Jack breaks in and gets Kotoko to knock it off.
Jeez. Now don't go getting captured by some little runt!
I thought you wouldn't come. I mean, right after we had that fight.
Fight? What the hell are you talking about? I just want to save Master Byaku.
Toku, I was so scared!
To put a pin in it, just about everything that involves Kotoko or even others in the game winding up in compromising situations in the game take place after Kotoko's backstory is revealed, which makes me consider the plausibility, this is not me saying this is established fact or anything, that it was meant that way to give different context to the scenes that come during and afterward, and even ones that came before. And for added effect, let me link up these lines.
Is it wrong for a kid to be doing this? But it's wrong for adults to be doing this too, right?
Not all adults are like that. There are good people who...
Then why didn't anyone save me? If the world is so good, why didn't anyone help me escape?
this makes it easy to realize that somewhere out there in the world there's other kids that are wanting to scream those same questions and fears that Kotoko and the other kids are wanting to know the answers to, which is probably one of the most clear points to take from this game moving forward. By this point, it's clear Monica is deliberately pushing the trauma buttons of everyone to control them, and does the same with Nagisa Shingetsu. What's his dark history? Well, some parents out there are worried about their sons or daughters succeeding, doing good in school and their studies. His parents took it to another bastard level. They hooked him up to IVs, pumped him full of drugs, and made sure he stayed awake to study every waking moment for days at a damn time. And it wasn't out of wanting him to succeed. It was more they were treating raising him to be the very best as a game. He uses the words XP and HP to compare what it was like. And he's also very aware things might be very wrong in what's going on. But they're too deep in and mentally broken to have a way out. He's also very blunt about another fact.
We're probably all insane. Broken. But whose fault is that? The adults are the ones who broke us.
Nagisa.
You want to hear the truth? We're scared. We're all terrified of the adults. Hearing their footsteps. Sensing their presence. We can't help but feel scared. Completely terrified.
That said, he has a clear fear of not living up to expectations. Because even though he was incredible at his academic achievements, it wasn't good enough for his parents, and they began to shun him like a used toy they grew bored with. This is used big time by Monica, in a couple scenes that might rival the grabby hands minigame in uncomfortableness. He has a crush on her, or at least who he thinks she is. And when he starts figuring out the awful truth, Monica starts really drilling into those mental cracks of his with some kisses and teasings. All in an effort to make sure that he acts the way she wants. And it's very clear he's freaking out over all of it. He's completely broken by this, and his boss fight is a strange combination of a careful, sneaky, hard-to-hit sniper, controlled by someone that, by any other means, would be a frothing berserker. This is also the chapter where Haiji's worst aspects start showing up. He completely hates the kids and is fully prepared to do whatever it takes to bring the fight to them and put an end to what, by now, is a war in the city. He also makes a comment that would be of interest to Chris Hansen, which Komaru makes a fairly reasonable response to.
Actually, can I leave now?
So that brings us to the end, with Monica.
The truth is, Monica didn't really care about things like revenge and paradise. Bitch!
She was deliberately written to be the most reprehensible, evil character they can make her. And like with other parts of the game, they did too damn good of a job. Professor XX Chromosome here is first off faking the wheelchair. She does it to get sympathy from people around her and her family, which includes Big Brother Haiji and their father. The father that just so happens to run Toa Corporation. A place where Monica convinced them to build the Monokuma robots en masse to be robot servants or emergency responders. Yeah, that's why there's so many of them, and that's how Junko got plenty of them. When it comes to the Warriors of Hope, Monica was in the middle of convincing them they should end things, as a prank, by the way, when Junko interrupted. Junko decided to use them for her goals and gave them the idea to go kill the adults for what they did to them or let happen to them, and wipe out the world that let such demons exist in it. By the time Junko died, all of them worshipped the ground Big Sis Junko walked on, especially Monica, who decided to take over as the manipulative mastermind. Due to Junko and Monica's plotting, the Warriors of Hope began their game of killing adults and putting brainwashing helmets on the children. Why? because Monica wanted to start a full-blown war that would restart the ultimate tragedy the world was just starting to heal from. As she puts it, what would future Foundation do to these surviving adults if they found out the Resistance killed children? And after all, the leader of the Resistance is a member of the company that made the Monokuma army and profited off selling technology to fight back against them and fix the world. Added to that, Monica, and to an extent Nagito, wanted to create a successor to Junko Inoshima. Not become one, create one. What would be more despair-inducing, after all, than to see the little sister of the boy who defeated Junko becoming the new ultimate despair? The whole game, the path they took and the stuff she went through, Komaru Naegi was being set up to do one thing that would cause all of the evil plans to come to fruition, just because she was Makoto's little sister and no other reason. Now, this sequence to break the controller goes on for a while. Maybe some stuff would have been lost if it was trimmed down, but it takes about an hour to get through it by constantly picking the obviously correct choice. Even if you break it the first time and find out that was a bad ending, you're spending the rest of the time, every time the selection pops up, going, look, all this talking and cutscene stuff is legitimately interesting, but can we just skip the next 5 times I gotta pick it, cause I gotta get to work. A major thing about the sequence is that, as it goes on, not only do you find out breaking the controller will detonate bombs in the masks the kids are wearing, but also the adults are losing patience, and stop calling out for victory, and start demanding blood and vengeance. That said, when it's all over, Komaru finally breaks in a horrific way when Monica shows Komaru her brutally slain parents. Only Toko, trying to do what's best for her friends, stops another tragedy from happening. When Monica tries to use Byakuya as her trump card again, Toko tells her to take a flying leap because Master Byakuya and her new and only friend Komaru are equally important to her, so she's saving both of them. Things get interrupted by the final boss, and you have to use all the tricks you learned to put the giant robot down.
I won't lose! I won't give up anymore! I won't abandon anyone! I won't give in! I won't fall into despair! This town is doomed? I'll fall into despair? No, that's wrong! Damn, Komaru! You go, girl!
It's here that we get the full theme I believe we can take away from the game. Friendship works because an honest friend is someone that can give you the right support for the both of you to get help to go through the tough moments in life. And that in turn helps us help others, giving the chance to build a better future in society. You know why the power of friendship works so well as a plot device between Komaru and Toko? Because for all the hell they go through, they have each other to lean on. They get hugs. Understanding, hearing each other out, support, and having a shoulder to lean on. These are things the kids didn't have and were never given a chance to have. Kotoko wasn't just hurt by her parents. Plenty of other adults hurt her. Nagisa's trauma should have been clear to others, but the experiment run on him was getting results. Not just parents, but others failed these kids. Those are the horrors and monsters we oftentimes forget to fear. Because of that, the only friend they ever got was one of the most horrible ones they could have gotten. Someone that just wanted to use them for themselves. And Monica knew this, and decided she was going to use Junko's plan for her own ends, manipulating and controlling the others in the worst ways imaginable. In comparison to all that, Toko, who definitely has her own issues you'll learn through the course of the game, was able to find her own growth and strengths by helping Komaru, evolving into both of them having moments to help and support each other when they needed it most. And at the end, they're able to save the world in a way that in any other game would just be an over-exaggerated finish. But in this game, I think was fully earned.
I found it. I finally found hope. A hope to call my own. Right, Kamaru?
Yeah, me too!
Hope lives on!
This team took their creative liberty in a direction that would have completely tarnished their record if they screwed it up one bit. If it was just showing us the horrible backstories of the children and going, oh, look how screwed up they are, isn't everything so horrible, and then moved on, it could have easily come off as insulting and a misguided attempt at being shocking. The time taken to give the kids a chance to give voice to what is going through their minds and show the lasting damage shows to me there was at least an attempt to show the creators are aware of how serious these implications are and an understanding of what they're getting into and suggesting to us. I can't say for sure if they intended for us to learn and think about all the lessons and thoughts I brought up in this video, but I get the feeling that as they were working on this stuff and putting it all together, they would have been aware of some of the aspects of it. Monica openly discussing how she was using children victims as part of a ploy to manipulate emotions and reactions kind of calls attention to the game doing the same thing, if in a different way. If anything, the game throws shade at the kind of stories that use evil kids as an edgy, cheap way to get attention. Possibly even at the people that like those kinds of stories. This is what I think is the darkest and most thought-provoking story in the Danganronpa series, and probably the darkest and most uncomfortable game I'm ever going to cover in my videos. To be blunt, they had some massive balls to make this thing like they did, and I'll leave it up to you whether or not they should have or shouldn't have done it. But because of the overall treatment and approach it gave to things, I respect this game a lot, and it is one of my favorites for that. I'm not trying to say it was entirely good, and subject matter like this isn't for everyone in terms of viewing, reading, or creating. The point I want to make about that is this game felt a lot more mature and respectful than other games and media that try going down this same road. If you know what I'm talking about, I'd sort of compare it to Spec Ops: The Line in some ways. It's incredibly easy to understand if some people think it went too far, though. One last game in the Danganronpa series, and when we come around to it, we'll see how the final game was just as controversial for much different reasons. But before that, we have another comment to request, so stay tuned for that. Until then, feel free to share your thoughts, comments, or whatever else you feel is worth sharing. I do want to be able to share independent or underrated media projects with everyone out there, so if you like what I do and want to help out with that, like, subscribe, and share. But for now, how about we have a little dance party to lighten the mood a little?